Okay, we're starting off with Sayyid Ahmad Shahid Barelvi's belief system. We discussed Shah Waliullah in detail yesterday, his work and everything. Let's look at Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi. So, importance of his work, importance of Sayyid Ahmad Shahid Barelvi was that he wanted to revive Islam, and he proposed this idea of jihad movement, an armed struggle against the non-Muslim rulers of the subcontinent. And obviously, just the jihad movement was also a forerunner for the Pakistani movement. It was also a driving force for the war of independence, because if you notice, all of these armed struggles against the oppressing forces are based on the same ideology. Then what were the achievements of Haji Shariat Ullah? Now we're just discussing these 4-mark questions in general from all of these three religious scholars. Haji Shariat Ullah, he launched Faraizi Movement. This is what I told you guys yesterday, and how he wanted to, the purpose of Faraizi Movement was to ensure that the Islamic principles were strictly followed. I think we discussed these questions yesterday. Mohsin-ud-Din's work, we also discussed the importance of Faraizi Movement. Did we? No, I think we didn't do the 7-mark questions. Okay, so guys, let me just share a whiteboard here. Okay, I'm drawing a concept web regarding this entire topic. The religious scholars. Yeah, just a second. Religious thinkers. Number 1, Shah Waliullah. Sayyid Ahmad Shahid Barelvi. And Haji Shariat Ullah. So now you guys will be studying this topic the beliefs of all these 3 religious thinkers. And after beliefs, we'll be looking at their work. I'm just going to write their important works here. Translation of Quran for Shah Waliullah. 51 books on Islam. Accounts on caliphs. Or you could say invitation to oppose Marathas. He invited Ahmad Shah Abdali. Letters to Mughal emperors. So these were all the important works of Shah Waliullah. Now, if you look at Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi, most important contribution was the jihad movement. And we're going to talk about jihad movement in detail. And for Haji Shariat Ullah, the most important contribution was the Faraizi movement. Okay. So guys, you can note this down. And then all together, for all of these 3, we're going to look at their influences. How their works impacted the people of the subcontinent, and how and why their contributions were important. So now, having said that, we know how we're going to be covering this chapter. We're talking about the reasons for these important works, their important contributions. For example, for all of these 6 tasks, 5 tasks of Shah Waliullah, translation of Quran, writing 51 books, accounting caliphs, why did he actually do all of this? For the jihad movement, we're going to see what was the reason behind the initiation of the jihad movement. What was the reason behind the formation of Faraizi movement? Let's look at those reasons now. So the first question here is, why did Shah Waliullah wish to revive Islam in the subcontinent? Generally, you're asked to write about why did Shah Waliullah do whatever he was, doing here, the translation, the writing of books, everything. Why was he actually doing all of that? Number one, he thought that the Muslims had a poor understanding of the Holy Quran because of the language gap. Quran was in Arabic, Persian, and Urdu were widely spoken in the subcontinent that time, and because there wasn't any translation accessible to the Muslims, it was difficult for them to understand the exact teachings. So yeah, as a result, superstitions and un-Islamic beliefs had developed in the Islamic society. Shah Waliullah believed that Muslims and Mughal Empire had declined due to neglect of Islamic teachings and principles. He wanted Muslims to prosper by following true Islamic practices and teachings. Then the second reason was the sectarian divisions, because the Muslims were divided into the Sunni and the Shia sects. They used to have a lot of conflicts, violence, hostility towards towards these other sects. So Shah Waliullah, he wanted the Muslims to be united, and he thought that this unity was one of the factors that could actually save the Mughal Empire from disintegrating. Strengthening the Muslim rule, because the Mughal emperors were weak, they were incapable to protect the empire from these foreign threats, local invasions, succession disputes, and everything. It was important for the Muslims to basically unite and to be strengthened against the common enemies. So it was his belief that if the Muslims, they could strengthen it, only then they'd basically defeat their enemies, and that is how they might be able to protect the Mughal Empire. So this is why Shah Waliullah wished to revive Islam in the subcontinent. Why did Sayyid Ahmed Barelvi wish to revive Islam? Now, again, the question is about the belief system of Sayyid Ahmed Barelvi. Why did he do all of the work for the Muslims? Why did he wish to launch the jihad movement? What were all the reasons? Number one, the first reason was that Sayyid Ahmed Barelvi thought that Muslims need to be liberated from the Sikh rule. The Sikhs in Punjab are a constant threat to the Muslims, because Muslims were not allowed to follow the Islamic obligations. The call to prayer, azan, was also banned. On Eid, slaughtering was at times banned. The Friday sermons were banned. So all of these Islamic practices were very important. They're till date very important to Muslims. This is why Sayyidina Barelvi thought that all of these sanctions, all of the unnecessary bans were actually hurting the religion, the religious sentiment of Muslims, which is why it was important for the Muslims to unite against the common Sikh rule, the foreign forces. And he believed that only armed struggle could basically free the Muslims from this oppressive non-Muslim rule. All right. Then another reason for the revival of Islam was the un-Islamic beliefs in the Islamic society. So this second reason is very common to all these religious scholars. Haji Shariat Ullah, Shah Waliullah, Sayyid Ahmed Barelvi, all of these scholars thought that because the Islamic practices have been forgotten, non-Islamic beliefs are very common, it is important to revive Islam. So the second reason is common to all of these religious thinkers' beliefs. So yeah, just to basically remove the superstitions, the un-Islamic practices, the belief systems, the un-Islamic influences in the society. Because obviously the Hindus, the Muslims, the Sikhs were living together at that time. And even, after the decline of Mughal Empire, British, they introduced Christianity as well. There were so many religions living side by side here. It was very important for each of the group to follow their own practices and not to take any other influences. So this is why Sayyid Ahmed Barelvi thought that it was very important to purify the Islamic society for the Muslims, of course. And then he thought that this low status of Muslims is because the Mughal emperors are ruling under the protection of British, and they were just puppet rulers here. So he believed that it was important to remove all of these foreign threats by an armed struggle, by jihad, because this entrance of British was seen as a threat to Islam. It was seen as a threat to the culture of the subcontinent. And alongside the entrance of British, all of these foreign invasions of Afghans, of the Persians, of the Marathas were also seen as threats to the religion and culture of the subcontinent. This is why Sayyid Ahmed Barelvi thought that defending the religion was important at this point, and hence he launched jihad movement. Now, why did Haji Shariat Ullah wish to revive Islam? Again, the first reason is, I mean, it's common to all of these. He wanted the Muslims to follow Islamic obligations, the moral obligations, or you could say the farz, because Faraizi movement meant that Muslims must follow farz is basically a moral, a social responsibility or an obligation, a religious, a religious obligation that you must take care of. So yeah, he wanted the Muslims to follow the Islamic obligations, and this is why he launched Faraizi movement. Yeah, and then purification of Islam again because the Muslim farmers were in the influence of these Hindu zamindars, the un-Islamic practices, the belief systems and everything. So this is why it was important to purify the region. And third, another reason for the launch of the Faraizi movement, or you could say another reason for these contributions of Haji Shariat Ullah, was the dominance of the Hindu zamindars. The zamindars had basically imposed heavy taxation on the Muslim farmers. They were being exploited. Their poor financial conditions were being exploited. So Haji Shariat Ullah realized that it was important for the Muslims to protect their own rights, to stand against these oppressing forces. Yeah, this is why he launched this Faraizi movement. Okay, so we're done here with the three reasons as to why the three religious scholars wish to revive Islam. Is there any question? Nice, should we move on? Okay. So now, why did Shawli? Actually, we're going to miss these questions here. They're very specific to these specific, you could say, contributions. So we're just going to miss these from here because you can just go through these on your own. The notes are there on the Google Drive. Now this question here, why were these attempts made to revive Islam in the subcontinent in the 18th century? It's a very general question. It just asks you to summarize three reasons in general regarding the contributions of the three religious scholars. Why did they feel like it was important for the revival of Islam? You could write any three reasons. Number one, the protection of Islam. Number two, oppressive rulers. You could write about Hindu zamindars. Okay, anything. These are the three. I think these three reasons are good for this question here. I can just write them here once. Just a second. So you can say this first reason could be purification of Islam. Second, uniting against the oppressive foreign rulers. And three, uniting against the Hindu zamindars. All right. Guys, these are the three reasons that you're supposed to follow for this question, which is a general question. It asks you to write down reasons for the revival of Islam in the subcontinent generally. Reasons for all of these three religious scholars. One of the ways to attempt this question is either just going for these three general reasons, or you could simply pick up one reason for Shah Wali Ullah, one reason for Sayyid Ahmad Bareilwi, and one for Haji Shariat Ullah. That is also another way to attempt this question. Okay. Moving on. Now, yeah, why did Shah Wali Ullah have such a major influence on the revival of Islam, or how important was Shah Wali Ullah? Now, the 7-mark question is basically asking you to analyze the importance of the works. And by importance, you need to write the influence here. How important were their contributions, and what impact, what influence did these contributions have on the people of the subcontinent? Number one, for Shah Waliullah, his books. The books, the 51 books on Islam, the accounts on rightly guided caliphs, they were acceptable to both the Shias and the Sunnis. The books Izzatul Akafa and Hijatullah al-Balika were basically, they did clarify the Islamic principles. So yeah, all of these works, they united the Muslims. They served as foundations for future research. This is why their influence was so important on the subcontinent. Second, you can pick up any other contribution, for example, translation of Holy Quran. Then in 2 to 3 lines, explain what this translation was and then how was it important. Your analysis for this reason must cater to the importance of this specific work. For example, by translating Holy Quran into Persian, the Quran became widely available for the Muslims and they were able to understand in a better way, and hence they understood the Islamic principles in a better way. This was important. Thirdly, stopping the decline of Mughal Empire. You can write how when he invited the Ahmad Shah Abdali to fight against the Marathas, he wrote letters to the Mughal emperors. There was a lot of chaos in the empire at that time. So all of his work, it proved that, I mean, it basically made the emperors, or you could say the rulers in power, realize that it was so important for them to unite against the common enemies. Ahmad Shah Abdali, they had this, but later, yeah, British, I mean, Marathas were defeated by the British, but again, you can say that at least an attempt was made. Someone at least showed a seriousness towards the leading crisis of that time. Shah Waliullah, he served as a role model for the Muslims. His sons continued his work. So people, when they saw that the religious thinkers were actually invested in the betterment of the subcontinent, they were actually invested in these causes, and they saw that they were actually serious towards dealing with these issues. This, I mean, his stand against these problems, his action was itself, I mean, it was exemplary, and this is why he became a role model for all of these, for all of the future religious thinkers and his sons as well. So this is the importance of this work. I mean, obviously, in literal terms, the Mughal Empire still declined, but the influence was there. The examples were obviously there, okay, for others to follow. And then next question is on the influence of Shariat Ahmad Barelvi. You can talk about his jihad movement. He defeated the Sikhs first, although in the second Balakot war, he was the forces of Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi were defeated. But initially, yes, the forces were strong enough to defeat the Sikhs. So it meant that the Muslims had to unite against the common enemy in the form of a jihad movement. This is why it was important. Secondly, unity for the Muslims. Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi also, you could say, served as an imam, because when there were a lot of exploitation in his army, people started to scatter. So what happened was the opponents, they took the differences in the Muslim army as advantages, and they tried to exploit those differences. In return, Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi assumed this authority of an imam. He tried to gather his forces. This is how you can talk about the unity. Muslims became united, and this is how they successfully fought against the Sikhs as well. And then the jihad movement was a forerunner for the Pakistani movement. This Pakistani movement was based on these ideas that Muslims had to protect their religion, their culture, by an armed struggle against the foreign rulers. So yeah, this is why it was important. And then talking about Haji Shariat Ullah, you can write about the Faraizi movement. Muslims, I mean, this Faraizi movement recognized the sole reason for the decline of the Muslim society, the ignorance towards the Farais, religious obligations. And this is why it was important. Thirdly, purification of Islam and revival. He basically warned the Hindu zamindars and all these oppressive rulers who were trying to oppress the Muslims. Muslim peasants and farmers, they uprose against them. This could be seen in the War of Independence as well. One of the reasons for the uprisings of 1857 was also these oppressive policies by the Hindus and the British. And thirdly, Haji Shariat Ullah also basically focused on a degree of jihad against the oppressive rulers. And that was again, it was seen in the War of Independence. Haji Shariat Ullah's sons, they also carried his movement further. They followed the Akbar's Mansabdari system by dividing the empire into different provinces and allocating the governors for each province. So yeah, his work was important because it was carried forward. It was, I mean, his sons carried forward his work. And obviously, yeah, Muslims started to realize the importance of Faraiz. They started to realize the importance of uprising against the oppressive rulers and speaking up for their political rights. Why did jihad movement fail? Now the 7-mark question is regarding the failure of jihad movement here. So let's get back to this question later. Let's talk about the 14-mark questions here. Now we're going to be talking about their work in detail in a 14-mark question. For example, and their importances as well. For example, this question here says, was Shah Wali Ullah the most important factor in the revival of Islamic subcontinent? Now what you need to do is you need to think of the importances of all of these religious thinkers. If you think that Shah Wali Ullah was the most important factor in the revival of Islam, you need to write 3 points for the importance of Shah Wali Ullah, 2 points for the importance of Sayyid Ahmad Bareilwi, and 2 points for the importance of Haji Shariat Ullah. This is what you're going to do if you think Shah Wali Ullah was the most important. So I'm going to write a structure for this question. So at level 3, you'll just be talking about Shah Wali Ullah. This is an understood fact, right? You need to talk about Shah Wali Ullah under any case on level 3, even if you agree to it or not. And level 4, you're going to talk about Sayyid Ahmad Bareilwi and Haji Shariat Ullah. And then an evaluation. And before all of this, you're going to start off with a simplistic statement. Okay, so now how many points to write for each of these here? So if you think Shah Wali Ullah was the most important contribution, you can make 3 points for this, 2 points for Sayyid Ahmad Bareilwi, and 2 points for Haji Shariat Ullah. Now this pattern in purple is just to be followed if you think Shah Wali Ullah was the most important. But if you think Sayyid Ahmad Bareilwi was the most important, so you'll write 2 points for Shah Wali Ullah, 3 points for Sayyid Ahmad Bareilwi, and 2 points for Haji Shariat Ullah. And the second pattern in blue is to be followed if you think that Sayyid Ahmad Bareilwi was the most important. However, if you think Haji Shariat Ullah was the most important, you're going to make 2 points for Shah Wali Ullah, 2 points for Sayyid Ahmad Bareilwi, and then 3 points for Haji Shariat Ullah. Okay, that is up to you. And then 1 evaluation for all. This pattern is completely up to you. You can pick up any of the 3 to follow, but remember the order of writing, the reasons for these personalities has to be the same. That's written in orange color here. Other than that, guys, be very careful that you're writing about the importances, not the works. You'll definitely be explaining the works here, but your main content will not be the work, but the importances. All right. Again, I'm repeating, your main content for this question will not be the contributions. You will definitely talk about the contributions, but your main content has to be around the importances, the influences, and that is how you're going to analyze those contributions. Okay. Now, yeah, okay, so we're done here. We're done with this topic. Just a second. And we're done with section 1 as well. There's just one more topic left, that is languages. We'll attempt languages after we're done with the entire syllabus. So section 1 is done here. From next week onwards, we'll be starting off with section 2. Yeah.